Perfect. Good evening. Thank you for coming. Thank you for being here to our South Texas Section AIChE meeting. Today is May the 3rd, 2018, and we're going to start with our agenda. We already started with some workshops, very interesting workshops, and then we have a networking hour. And now we're going to start with the announcements. These are the announcements for the chapter. And then we're going to have a break. After the break, we're going to start our speaker presentation, our dinner presentation. So I want to thank you to our executive board, all our members, all our volunteers who are doing a great and awesome job in all the different subcommittees that we have. Events, we have the season pass. We have 38 season pass members. For those of you who want to sign for next year, this is a great opportunity to have a combo. It's like a paying for the full year, all the dinners, and you come to the dinners that you want. You are invited to all of them. In case you are not able to make it, you can send someone as a replacement. So we have 38 people signing up for the season pass. We are always looking for companies who wants to participate as a sponsor or in many different ways, providing a workshop or providing the dinner presentation. We have 3 opportunities, being a bronze member, a silver, or a gold. So in case you are interested or your company is interested in participating, please let us know so that way we can make the proper arrangements. This month, we want to thank Metso, Chem Stations, and Armstrong Chemtech Group, who are providing the sponsorship for this month, and thanks to them, we can subsidize many of these events. We also have in the past, last year, 2017, these other companies that were collaborating with us as sponsors. We also have on the South Process Technology Conference these former sponsors. So we put them here because we want to show you that these companies, the diversity of the industry that we have, and all of these companies are in some way or the other helping out the chapter. I'm going to start with education. Last month, we have a very interesting meeting. It was at the east part of town, and we have a presentation given by Vinod from Rajkumar from Bechtel. He gave an interesting presentation, and it was also the opportunity to provide the students from RISE and also the awards winners their prizes. For tonight, we have the presence of Tom Williams with Honeywell. His presentation is titled Better Decisions Faster. Simple things can reduce incidents and improve operator performance. Before that, we have two great workshops. The first one was evaluating valve condition, a part of any safe and efficient operation, given by Todd Harrison and Stephen Obermann. Thank you for that great presentation. And also we have the second workshop given by Charles Herzog about keep distillation system on spec at maximum rates. So please, I want to thank you. Give a round of applause to gentlemen who were able to participate early in the evening. Now, to give an update on the student chapters, on the last 2 months, we provided the scholarship for our students. These students, 3 students for the different colleges that we sponsor, Texas A&M, Rice University, Prairie View A&M, and also the University of Houston. We finished granting the scholarships, and now we are going to prepare for the next year to provide those scholarships to the future students. Now, one update that the University of Houston sent us, it was they are changing their board, so we have new names. Lucas Bonroof is going to be the head over the University of Houston chapter, and they have many events prepared for the spring and the summertime. So in case you guys have or know someone who is interested in participating in those events, going back to your alma mater and helping out these kids, being a mentor or being a guide for these students, let us know so we can put you in contact with them. I would like to call Matt Kolodny, who can provide us our update on the K-12 outreach activities. Matt?
Thank you, Carlos. Let's see the slides. Okay, well, tonight we have 2 science fair winners. Well, first I'd go over these that are from the Boy Scout fair back in April. They have a regional Scout fair every year at Energy Arena, and these are some of the photos. We had a great time. We had several people participating, and I should have written down the names, but we had 4 volunteers. Fang Su Ming was there, Carol Schmidt was there, and Eureka did an exceptional job helping us out, and we want to thank them. Okay. I guess next thing would be the science fair winners. This was back in at the end of February, and we have 2 people tonight. Hudson, would you like to come up? Which is Hudson's bag? This one? Okay. Come on up, Hudson. Come on up. Hudson, I guess I better get here where I can use the microphone. You want to get on the other side for a minute? Thank you. Hudson is in 11th grade at the Academy of Science and Technology at Woodlands, which has for years had a great science fair program. And this year he's taking physics, chemistry, and calculus. Were those AP or just regular? Well, those are even regular classes. That's quite an impressive load. And he's been involved in science fairs, his parents said, since he was in 2nd grade. And I asked him, and he said he's enjoyed it and learned a lot about his career, something about his career plans by doing it. Hudson, what are you going to want to do for your career, do you think?
Hi, I'm Hudson. As a career, I want to be at the forefront of environmental biotechnology, and I hope to be an engineer, an environmental engineer, although chemical engineering is a really cool tool. So.
Great, and Hudson also wants to include some business administration in there. And and when you want to go to college, have you thought of any schools?
My number one university is Rice, and number two, UT.
Okay, now we got an award. This is a top-of-the-line graphing calculator from Texas Instruments. Includes not only the capability and plenty of memory, but a bunch of information on various science and engineering classes and math. And this is a case for it. And we also have some goodies, one of our STS-AIChE mugs. We'll put it back so you don't leave your hands free when you're getting off the stage. Well, you can put them back in here.
Thank you. These are very cool.
Great.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Best of luck. Okay, Sydney. And in addition to the norm, this is Sydney Brown, and she's a very impressive person too. We have two awards being handled today. We have the normal awards for chemical engineering, but the Houston Museum of Natural Science also gives a number of internships every summer. And I know through ECH, I know Dr. Carolyn Sumners, who chooses those interns, and she is very good at what she does, and she chose Sydney. Sorry, I have too many things I'm juggling here. Sydney is going to be graduating from high school this year, and she went to Yes Prep. Which particular one?
Braze Oaks.
Great. And she has been taking, this year, she's been taking AP Physics, AP Environmental Science, and AP Calculus, which is for a career you want to be
A physicist.
which is, that's fine. It's a career in physics is even more challenging than chemical engineering, and so you really impressed me, and I wish you well. And she's been involved in the science. This is your first year in the science fair. How did you find it?
My physics teacher told me you should do this. I was like, okay.
Mm-hmm. Good. And where are you going to be going to college next year?
Boston University.
Great. And she did a program on non-Newtonian fluids in infrastructure during earthquakes, which is the idea is when the things start shaking, the non-Newtonian fluid firms up so things don't shake too much. So thank you very much, and I hope you have a good, well, wish you best of luck finishing up your high school, and hope you have a great summer at the museum. And when you get through with that, we'll ask you to give us a couple of paragraphs for our newsletter in the fall.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Be finished in a minute. Let's see. And the remaining things, first, there's going to be Houston Geological Society is going to be having a flooding in southeast Texas. So any of you who would like to learn more about it, it might not help your career directly, but it could help you in your home. You can contact me about it. They have a website I can tell you about. And then one thing we'd like to do this summer, if any of you are interested, for our K-12 outreach activities, we'd like to develop a tabletop model of a chemical plant. And if any of you would like to help us with that, again, let me know. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. thank you for your great job, and thank you for all the opportunities that we have to plant the seeds in the future generation of engineers and scientists in our country. Now, community outreach. With the community outreach, this previous month, we have the OTC bags. We went to Carol's house, and we provided the OTC bags that SPE uses for the teachers and students at high school level. We prepared those bags and took them to the Reliant Arena, and they have the opportunity to share those moments with the community. Now, remember that we also are partnering with the Society of Petroleum Engineers, and we go usually to the Beacon and also to the Houston Food Bank. In case anyone of you is interested in coming to these events, you are more than welcome to come. We usually go every other month. For workshops, networking workshops, I don't know, Jimmy, do you want to go ahead and provide a synopsis of the workshops?
We have 2 networking workshops every month. One is on the first Friday. It's on the west side at the Wyndham Hotel. And then there's another one on the third Friday, which is at the Pipeline Grill in La Porte, which is called the Process Networking Forum. So this year, this past month, Fabian, can you remind me who was the speaker? What was the talk? No. Oh, okay, all right. Well, and then there's one tomorrow, which is Terry Safradini. She's going to talk about how to increase your chances of getting a job and put a good resume together. And then on the third Friday, we have a gentleman who's going to talk about let's see. Oh, there it is. Okay. Yeah, Cody Rossier. And he's going to talk about the guarding against plant security breaches. That's it. I got taken aback because I was not ready to come and talk. Okay, so that's it. And the one on the east side is more plant-oriented. The one on the west side is more engineering, construction, company, design-oriented. So all of you are welcome to come. They are free, except that you have to pay for your own meal, even though it's subsidized. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you, Jimmy, and thank you for our volunteers who are participating in these workshops. This is another opportunity for you guys to go to different times, different days, not only our monthly meeting on Thursday night, but also during lunchtime. Now, I would like to call our friend Dennis, who's going to provide information about the chip channel tour.
Thank you, Carlos. Well, all of y'all may have thought that our monthly meetings are over, but not quite. We're going to be having our annual Houston Ship Channel tour, and it's on the first Saturday in June, the 2nd of June. You'll have to go up to the website when we get this set up there to sign up and register. We're charging a $10 per person refundable fee, just, because let's put it this way. We've learned that if you put a little investment in it, you will show up. We're limited to only 65 people in total on the ship channel. We'll be having barbecue and all, but we want to make sure that, everybody who signs up does come. The meal and everything, the open bar is being furnished by the Port Authority. So I want to encourage you to go to the STS-AICHE website and sign up when we get it posted. We'll be providing a notice about it in the next couple of few days. And then let's see if we got another slide here. Okay. The other thing, and this is more of a save the date. Did you know the South Texas section is now 75 years old? Yes. And so we're going to have a diamond anniversary celebration in November. It'll be also on the first Saturday in November, the 3rd of November. And we're still organizing, getting things done for it. It'll be at the Houston Racquet Club, which is basically at Memorial and Voss. And we'll be providing more information about what's going to be on the program and everything. Yes, Tom?
You said save the date. You said November 3rd or November 11th?
Yeah, that is,
It's November 3.
I just realized that's a typo.
Oh, okay. It's November the 3rd. It is, the contract's been signed for November the 3rd. November 3. Thank you, Tom, but yeah. And I think that's November the 3, because that happens to be the birthday of our new little doggy. So guess what? I'm going to bring the dog. Never mind. No. But it'll be a very nice affair. We're limited to about 250 people at it, so when we get everything set up and online, the registration will open, and you can sign up to come to that. Thank you. All right.
Okay. Thank you, Dennis. And also, if you guys want to participate as a volunteers, we still need people to run the different subcommittees. Maybe prepare all those preparations that we need to run this activity. Now, for the young professionals, unfortunately, Swaroop is not here. He's our young professional chair. So Swaroop has prepared the networking event for May. It's going to be the Friday, the May the 18th. It's going to be on a place called Under the Radar Brewery. There is no RSVP necessary. You don't have to be a young professional. Anyone is invited, as long as you come with participate in the event. That is open for anyone. Now, I would like to recognize our Young Professional of the Month. So if you could please stand up. Brian Porchot has been a tremendous member with the Young Professional Group. He has been very active in many different activities, many social events and technical events, going to the universities, and many different ways. He has been very active on our chapter, and I would like to congratulate him. He deserves this recognition, and more than that, he went to the University of Houston and got his Bachelor of Science in Chemical Engineering. He has held many different positions in the industry. Right now he's technical sales. And he's our guy for the social events, and actually he's planning the game for the Houston Astros later in the summer. By the way, this is the slide. We are going to have July the 27th. The Astros, our champions, are playing the Rangers. So in briefly, we are going to start selling out the tickets. So if you guys want to go and enjoy a good time with friends, family, it's coming up. Thank you, Brian. Thank you. Okay, this week just passed, and we have a very important event in town. It was the Offshore Technology Conference. The Offshore Technology Conference was celebrating a major milestone. It turned out that it was the 50th-year anniversary, and we would like the South Texas section want to extend a thank you to all our volunteers who participated in not only preparing the bags, the stuff, goodie bags that we provide to the teachers, but also to the people who were participating in the technical program, in the board, in the Next Wave activity. And there was an event that it was offered at the Rice University earlier in the week, and we have many different people who were participating in this technical program, and people from AICHE in New York came into town, and they were there. So thank you to all of you who participate in any way in the OTC. Now, we have the Arctic Technology Conference, which is the sister event for the OTC. It's going to be on November the 5th, and we are still looking for volunteers who wants to participate in the subcommittee group. So in case you are interested, please let me know, so that way I can put you down there. SPTC, the South Process Technology Conference, is going to take place in October the 9th, which is a Tuesday and Wednesday this year. It's going to be later in the year, but we would like to give you a heads up so you can say the date. We have some sponsor companies: Chemstations, Gulf Coast Engineering Solutions, HTRI, Ingeniero, Process Industry Practices, TLB, Johnson Matthey, Process Technology, Virtual Materials Group, Bowen, Metal Products, and Monroe Environmental. So in case you guys are interested in participating as a sponsor, please let us know so we can sign you up. Other opportunities for volunteers, we're always looking for people. In case you guys are interested, we have opportunities open as a webmaster, as arrangements committee, marketing. So there are many things that you guys can help us with. So in case you want to participate in one way or the other, it doesn't have to be full-time, it can be part-time or 1 month, other month. So let us know so that way you can join us. And it's also a good opportunity for the young professionals. You can develop many different skills, soft skills that probably you don't develop in the workplace. This time you learn in a positive and great environment these skills. So we're going to have a 10-15 minute break. This is going to be a time for networking, have a conversation with your peers, and after that we're going to start our speaker presentation, dinner. Thank you.
I got a green light. Can you hear it? Okay, that's okay. That may or may not work. Let's see. I might be better off with the wireless mic.
Let me just try putting it a little closer.
Yeah, put it the way you would normally use it.
So we would normally put it about there. Let's try that.
Okay. Anybody hear me? Yeah, that sound. I can hear it,
Yeah,
but only if I turn toward it.
Yes. So it does have that disadvantage. But if you're
So
talking
let me
about-
ask you something. If I project like I'm trying to project to the back corner,
Yeah.
it will certainly pick up. The question is, will the volume go up and down a lot?
Probably a little bit, but that's why we have somebody at the soundboard to
Okay.
monitor that. So I think that should be okay.
I would prefer that, I think.
Well, I think
Okay, after this break, we're going to start our presentation. I would like to introduce a fine gentleman, Tom Williams. He is part of the Honeywell Group. He works as a global leader of operator effectiveness at Honeywell Process Solutions, and is a director of the Abnormal Situation Management Consortium, ASM. He holds a Bachelor of Science in Chemical Engineering at Princeton University, and also a Master of Science from Rutgers University. He started his career as a R&D engineer with Mobil Oil, also with Mobil Chemical, and he has been involved in process development and design, plant optimization and automatization at Honeywell Performance Materials and Technology. Tom holds 3 patents and is a certified Six Sigma black belt. Please help me welcome Tom Williams.
Okay, good evening, everyone. I'm assuming you all can hear me well, because if that's not a problem, I can do this without a microphone. Okay, very good. Well, thank you all very much for staying for this evening's presentation. And thank you very much, Carlos and the organizing committee, for having me here today. Well, what I'm going to be talking to you today is various simple things that you can do to improve operator effectiveness, and we'll talk about what that means. This is an important topic in industry. We work in process industries, whether it's petrochemical, chemical, pulp and paper, power generation. All of us are working in industries where there is significant risk, and also industries that the public's not particularly trustful with. So part of what we would like to be able to do is to submit to you that there are ways of improving operator effectiveness, reducing risk, and improving operations. So let me start off with a disclaimer. First of all, I am not a human factors professional. I don't have a degree in human factors psychology. I don't have a degree in neuroscience or something like that. I'm a process engineer, but I am dedicated to doing what I can to get the most out of manufacturing assets and capital. And I've spent my career doing basically that, just exactly that. My is I started in R&D with Mobil, now ExxonMobil. I worked in petroleum and chemicals and polymers. And then I started working for Allied Signal, which later on changed its name to Honeywell, and so I've been there over 30 years. In the last 10 years, I have moved from more of the chemical side and operations over to controls, and now working as the director also of the Abnormal Situation Management Consortium, which I'll describe in a bit. So let's start off by talking about risk and where this comes from. I think you all recognize that there are things that our control systems are not absolutely perfect. I'd love to think that as a process engineer, I could create an inherently safe system, or a system that had such a good controls to it that I would never have to worry about things going wrong. However, disturbances occur, and in some cases those can escalate. And so we have what we've described as abnormal situations. Those are things where the control system is faced with a deviation or disturbance, and the control system by itself cannot control the situation. As a result, the operator has to intervene. We call that abnormal situations. Okay, as we probably know, the problem with that is that often things that cause abnormal situations, if they aren't handled correctly, they can escalate, and they can escalate quite badly, as we've seen. The example shown on the screen there is the Piper Alpha disaster that occurred in 1988. 167 oil platform workers and rescue crews died in that incident. So what we're trying to do is to ensure that we can ensure that accidents like that don't happen. And even though accidents like that are rare, there's still considerable cost to abnormal situations if they escalate at all. You might have environmental damage. You might have injuries to your employees. You might have damage to equipment and not even know it, which might cause you a problem later on. So even though accidents are rare, even small mistakes can have consequences. So what can we do? The Abnormal Situation Management Consortium started in the 1990s. It started with a whole group of companies, and the first thing it did, it said, how big is this problem? Well, the problem is pretty big. If you go out and look just at incidents, just in the U.S., in the 1990s, we measured about $10 billion in routine losses every year. So I had asked the question, well, because of the ASM Consortium and ISA and EMUA and a bunch of other organizations, aren't we getting better? And the answer is yes, but chemical and process industries have grown a lot, and the knowledge is not universally shared. So we went back in 2009 and we started collecting the severe incidents that occur in industry, either things that cause injuries or cause death. And it's not a pretty picture. In 2009, we pulled from the media 118 incidents that led to 78 deaths and 213 injuries. Now, if you go to our website, you'll see that we keep that list up to date. And we're continuing to see basically one serious incident every 3 days. That's not an enviable record. So what is the source of these abnormal situations? Where do they come from? Why do these things occur? And if you go and you look through the data and you analyze it carefully, you'll see that basically roughly 40% are directly caused by what the typical people in the media will call human error. Now, I don't like that term. We'll talk about why in a bit. But nonetheless, direct action by humans are responsible, generally speaking, for 40% of those incidents. But what about some of the other causes, equipment failure and other? Well, it turns out that if you look at equipment failure, nearly 76% of the things that happen that are equipment failure are also somehow or another related to things that humans do. Now, that's not necessarily just operators or field operators. It may also be operating at a range. It might be incorrect repair, and so on. At any rate, about 70% of the incidents that occur ultimately go back to something that humans do or don't do. Okay, so industry hasn't been inactive. We've done a lot of different things. As I said, the ASM, enormous impetus to it was the Phillips petrochemical explosion in 1989, which added an awful lot of urgency and got the U.S. government involved and asking Honeywell and others, what can we do about these things? Something isn't right. We aren't coming at this with a deep scientific knowledge. We aren't pursuing what we do know and checking that it works in industry. What can we do about that? And so the consortium was formed initially as a joint program between the U.S. government and 16 member companies. And then since 1997, all the funding has been from member companies and Honeywell. We've spent about $45 million researching the causes and some of the things we can do to prevent abnormal situations, or if we can't prevent them, what can we do to ameliorate them? I'm going to back up now and talk a little bit about what do we mean by human factors, because not everybody may be familiar with that term. So what I'm trying to point out here is that humans and computers are different. Humans are extremely good at many things, and computers are very good at some things. Humans in particular are extremely able to recognize patterns very, very rapidly compared to computers. And on the other hand, the computer can provide vigilance that humans can't do. So I boil this down into basically humans are good at blink or inspiration and envisioning, imagining what may occur. And computers are very good at what we think of as calculating or perspiration and execution. Well, part of our goal is to figure out how to arrange the work that needs to be done to have the best of both of those brought together and arrange the work so each is deployed optimally. Let's talk about human thinking for a moment. Why are humans so unique? Humans are born with pretty amazing abilities. We know that they're born with this because we can work back and do studies have actually been done with infants to take a look at what they know right from birth. For example, humans can learn, don't have to be taught to learn. They learn automatically. Another thing they can do is, we talked about pattern recognition. So, the studies show that infants have tremendously high-level skills already. And then humans use imagination and mental simulation, which we call typically envisioning, to decide how to solve a problem. They don't go through lists of checklists and say, I've got to check off and ensure that this and this and this aren't the cause. We do a lot of projection. We'll talk about that in a bit. So there's a very strong visual component to what we do. Over 30% of our conscious brain is involved in visual processing. So anytime you can present data in a visualized sense and give it context, humans have a huge advantage in figuring out information very quickly. So the moral of that story is what we're seeking to do is to make human work visual and to avoid over or under stimulation that keeps human beings from perceiving the information that they're getting. Okay, this is a very interesting and kind of foundational chart that shows in a situation the humans are facing something novel, a critical situation, or just any disciplinary thing where they have to make a decision. Humans follow a certain pathway. If you have an initiating event, the first thing that happens is we orient ourselves to it. That is, we become aware that something's different, something's changing. So we have a perception and we say that this is not the way it was before. We do this discrimination in our heads. The second step of that is we analyze it and say to ourselves, okay, what does this mean? And then we do a projection and say, where is this going to lead to? So if I'm operating a chemical plant and I see a situation developing, I become aware of it, and then I recognize its significance, and then finally I start to say, where is this going to go if I don't take some action? So finally, we then do take an action, and at the same time we're beginning to look and assess, is that action the correct one? Is this solving the problem? Or if I project out again, is this not going to lead to a return to, in this case, normal operation? So the goal of this whole process is to say, okay, if I have a disturbance and I solve this problem, I want to put the thing back into normal control where the control system can take the problem back over. So if you want to understand where things can go wrong, how can humans make mistakes, then you have to analyze each one of those, orienting, evaluating, acting, assessing, and then what can happen in all stages. So our goal in the consortium is to try to help humans make better decisions and make them faster. So if you look at these, each of these has certain areas that are problematic. And what we've done in the consortium is go systematically through these things to take a look and say, what can we do to root out errors in these? Hence, the 6 items that I want to talk to you about tonight. Now, these will not solve everything up there. However, these are each of these actions. 5 out of the 6 are things that don't require lots of capital. You can do in your plants to ensure that you have operator effectiveness and that operators can take timely action. So I'm going to talk about, I will talk about each one in order, but I just wanted you to notice that there's basically 6 basic things. Ensuring the operators aren't overloaded, develop console displays that are designed with human factors in mind, then working on procedures that are up to date, easy to search, easy to use, and complete, improving communications, improving operator competency, we'll talk about that, and finally, providing a conducive control room environment. If you do those six things, you can do an excellent job of reducing your risk and improving your performance. Oh, big deal to work for it. Okay, remember that slide I showed you where it said here are the things that go wrong for each of these? If you adopt these 6 things, you will have mostly eliminated everything in green as a problem. That's a lot. That's like 16 or 17 out of 25 you will have eliminated if you go through that list. Eliminated is probably too strong a word. Nothing will absolutely eliminate all of them. But you can basically ensure that these are taken care of. Now, the others that are in yellow, we still have made an impact on those too. So it's not like we've only dealt with 16 of the 25. We have done something to ameliorate all of these. But there are some things that are more difficult to deal with. So, for example, confirmation bias is difficult to deal with. The tools we talk about here will help, but they won't eliminate it. All right, so let's talk about each of them in order. What are things that you can do? One of them is to reduce operator overload. And one of the first things you can do to do that is to manage your alarm system. Now, I have up here the recommendations of the Electrical Equipment Manufacturer Users Organization in the UK. And the consortium has gone and checked that, and those are indeed very good metrics to look for, and they will actually do a very good job for you. If you maintain your long-term alarm rate to 1 alarm every 10 minutes, reduce your alarm rate during upsets to 10 alarms in 10 minutes, and reduce your standing alarms to 10 or less per console, your operators will be able to operate that console. They will not have an overload. I can tell you I've been in a lot of plants where they're not anywhere close to this level of performance, but I've also been in very, very complex plants where people have worked on this and achieved all of this. Sometimes there's trouble here with the upset still, and we can talk about other things you can do for that. But nonetheless, these are not completely unrealistic goals. There are even customers I have where the plant manager is partly graded on how well this is done. Okay, so that's a very important thing, not to is reduce the operator overload. So how do you do this? That sounds like it's impossible. How do you get down to per console one alarm every 10 minutes on average or less? How do you get down to not more than 10 standing alarms? And how do you get to alarm floods that are less than 10 alarms in 10 minutes? So the way you do that is multi-step. You go through a practice we call alarm philosophy. You develop an alarm philosophy, and you have to make sure that in the end, everything that comes up as an alarm has a response. If the operator can't do anything about it, then it's either, I'm sorry, but we'll call you next of kin, or else it is an action that you can take. One of the two. So it's really that simple. So one of the first things you have to do, put in a system that actually measures your alarm rates. Know what you're dealing with. How many alarms do your operators have? And look for what we call the bad actor alarms and keep working until you get to this level. Now, another great idea that came out of the EEMUA is the concentrate your efforts. Look at what are the top 10 alarms that you get every week and work on those top 10 until you beat them down. And if you have an evergreen system in your plant, you can do that. And eventually you will get to that level. So that's number one. Reduce your operator workload, manage your alarms. Okay, display basics. I see a lot of displays in industry. I see a lot of really, really good ones that are extremely well thought out, and I see some that are really, really bad. If I go into a control room and I see that operators have tons and tons of information flowing all over them, and I see a zillion straight lines, then you can congratulate yourself that you're running well, but your displays aren't really helping your operator. The operator needs to be able to discriminate what really needs attention from all the other stuff that's going on in the control room. So what the ASM Consortium has done is gone at it and measured exactly what helps operators. In fact, we've gone to the point where we've had researchers put a lot of equipment in there and measure exactly where operators' eyes move and what solves problems and what doesn't. We've done a lot of interesting studies. If you have, what you want to have, first of all, is a system where you have a multi-level screens, a hierarchy of your displays. You want to always know where the entire plant that you're responsible for, you need to know what your console's doing. Even if you're down in the details, you need to know if something else is going on so that doesn't come up and catch you without knowing that something else is going wrong. So you need to have process unit overviews that allow you to look and understand more about what a problem developing might be. You also need detailed displays that allow you to actually do the solving of the problem. And yet, at the same time, you still need to have that L1, that higher level display that shows me everything that's going on in my plant in some sort of a nutshell. And there are methods of doing this. Okay. And then we talk about providing context. I'm going to show you some examples of things that work. Your goal is to make exceptions visible, not congratulate yourself on how well you got straight lines across your trends. You want to know that when something goes wrong, you can detect that. You'd like to detect it before it even becomes an alarm. You'd like to know if something is trending away. Now, how do you do that? So we're going to talk about ways of doing that. We strongly recommend that you look at using color extremely sparingly, and we'll see why in a moment. You can use gray, you can use monochromatic display backgrounds, but you want to make sure that anything that's going wrong stands out immediately, and the operator can see it, stuck in a plethora of a zillion colors. Avoid distractions. I've been in control rooms that have lots of screwy distractions. I've seen displays where everything is flashing. When everything is flashing, the operator cannot tell what in the world is most important and what's going on. And flashing is extremely distracting. You want to minimize some of that. And then use shapes that are readily understood. Shapes should be simple and inherently understood. If you look at some displays that people do, they've got all kinds of fancy-looking compressors and all kinds of things that are going on inside. If that doesn't help your operator make a decision, then all that fancy stuff's not helping you. It may be, in fact, making it harder for the operator to operate. All right, so let's talk about data in context. So a lot of people, I go into the plants and I see a guy's got a tower, he's got a ton of trays in it, he's got displays that show the temperatures, and you can't see what's going on in that. You can study this thing for 5 minutes before you realize that, I've got something going on down here in tray 31. If you give yourself a graphical way of seeing it, you've provided the context. Don't make the operator have to use a lot of mental processing to find out what's going on in the plant. Use graphics, use displays, use figures, because human beings process visual information 60,000 times faster than tabular. We're not computers, so you need to think about that. Okay. Now here's a little test I give people. I'm going to give you 10 seconds and see if you guys can tell me how many alarms there are and where the most severe ones are. So here's a display. This is an actual display from a working plant. And I guarantee you in 10 seconds, how many of you know where the alarms are? How many of them are there? Somebody said 4. That's right. How do I know? That's how I know. I can see them immediately. If I have a gray background or a monochromatic background and I use colors, I can tell instantly. I don't even take a tenth of a second to recognize how many alarms there are. And in this particular case, these are red, so they're the highest level. This is the next level, and then this one is the lowest level alarm on this page. Okay. Now, we don't just do studies by anecdote. The consortium goes and actually measures things. We want to know how much better things work. And then we have a baseline for which we continue to try to improve what they do. So we did an interface study where we're comparing the existing drill-down framework to an ASM framework. Now, this is a relatively old slide. We've advanced a lot further than this, but this study is extremely effective because it was done on an actual operating plant. It was verified with a simulator to get numbers, and the company came through and did indeed validate the actual economic impact of this in their plant. So What you're comparing here is there's the 4 levels, the hierarchy we talked about before, the use of the gray scale, the embedded trends, the group and point details, there's linked navigation and so on. And then so the study was run, and what did it say? It said, first of all, remember the first step is orientation. Well, first of all, you can see the bar chart here. There are actually 4 scenarios here. This was the traditional one. This is the ASM style, and there are 4 different bar chart here. And what you can see is that you can easily orient to the problem much more quickly. And that you can see by these are the averages for the before, and this is the averages after. So the total completion time was actually a 41% improvement. The operators on average solved this problem in 10 minutes versus 18 minutes on average for the 4 separate scenarios. But I want you to see something else in this data because it jumps out at me, and that is I want you to see the giant spreads that you're dealing with here in the traditional display versus the improvements that you get. It isn't just that the average has dropped, it's the spread that's dropped. So what this means is that the less experienced operators are performing at a much better rate than they were before. In fact, they're almost catching up to the most experienced operator. So a tremendous difference in using this sort of framework. Now, there's some other data in here we're going to talk about in a bit because there's some other things that you can draw from this data. At any rate, so what are we trying to do here? We're demonstrating that we can close the gap between the novices and the experts in your process. All right, now we're going to talk about procedures. One of the things we talked about is what happens with procedures, and how you take care of procedures is also a big component in operator effectiveness. The ASM went out and did a number of studies. First of all, they did a study with its internal members, and they took a lot of data and looked carefully, and what they saw was that about 14% of the incidents in these member plants, and this is done over multiple years. This is done over 4 years in member plants. And what they found was that about 14% of all incidents had as one of their root causes, not necessarily the most important cause, but as one of their contributing factor at least, was operating procedures. And this over here lists all the different problems you had. One of the main problems we saw with this was that in general, people had pretty good procedures for startup, they had pretty good procedures for shutdown, they had pretty good procedures for normal operation. So what were they lacking? They were lacking procedures for abnormal situations, things that they could anticipate, but hadn't bothered to take the same rigor to put down what you wanted the operator to do when something abnormal occurred. And yet, these are things they knew would happen. Well, one particular company in particular, one site, had an average of $3 million in financial losses due to just improper procedures. Okay, now, so there's a number of things you can do. The first thing you can do is you can look at what are the things you can anticipate that you know in, say, 10 years is likely to happen in your plant, and have procedures for that, every unit. There's something else you can do that the ASM then decided to go out and do a larger study, and it took in 32 public and private incident reports and looked very, very carefully at what's going on with these procedures, what's causing them. Okay, in the case of, for example, they weren't followed correctly. Well, what was that? The format was confusing, details needed improvement, the checkoff list was misused. They really went down and drilled to the very base level in each of these. There were 3 major categories. The procedure was followed incorrectly, the procedure was, in fact, just plain wrong, or the procedure was not followed. Okay? So what I'm going to suggest to you is one of the things you can do is automate some of those procedures. Take things that are either not done often, and so the operators don't remember how to do them, or things that you've had near misses in the past. It's a good indication, that maybe automating those are not a bad idea. Of course, automating a wrong procedure won't help you. But taking the time to do a proper job means that the procedure will be followed correctly instead of incorrectly. It also means that the procedure is likely to be followed. And if you add up those two alone, that's 60% of those types of failures. 60% you can deal with. Okay, so you need to address the abnormal situations, and potentially you could rule out a lot of them just by automating. Improving communications. Though communication it's not just essential, it's critical. I mean, we've seen examples over and over again where communication failed, and as a result, we had a major incident. But then there are tons and tons of things that don't rise to a full-blown incident that are caused by miscommunication. And so one of the things that we urge people to do is to work on structured protocols. How do you need to pass information between functions, between units, and so on? What is the best way to communicate and work that out ahead of time? It's important to communicate between the units, functions, for example, operations and maintenance, and do coordination between shifts with a very, there are lots of good tools in shift handover now. People have recognized this and are going to deal with it. Oh, let me just take an example. I had a pipeline customer, and they were growing rapidly, and they were very, very used to simply having the folks call up and say to the main control room, it's time, we're getting ready to push so many more thousands of barrels an hour through. And when the operation was small and you were only dealing with a couple of different lines, that was okay. When you start doubling and tripling the amount of decisions that people have to make, you need to be able to ensure that there's a positive reinforcement and positive answer back. So you need to know that the message has been received, and you also need to know that that message has been understood. So in order to do that, I mean, an example, a simple way is to use instant messaging and use a military protocol to ensure that it's understood. If you do that, you can make those things work. Remember the example I had on the second slide with Piper Alpha? This is a good example where communication went wrong. The startup team thought the main pump A was ready when pump A had its relief system taken off, and all was there was a blind flange, and that wasn't even tightened down all the way. And in fact, the prior team had left a note saying, don't start up pump A. Pump A is not ready. That note never got to this next team. So something went wrong seriously at shift handover. Now, of course, a visual inspection of pump A would have shown immediately it wasn't ready to go. That wasn't done either. As a result, 167 people died. Now we're going to talk about training a little bit. Okay, people spend a lot of money thinking about training. Not all of it is effective. You need to think carefully about how you do your training. You need to define the kinds of outcomes and competencies that you want people to develop, and you need to back that up to how do I know that that's being learned. A lot of training is done in our plants just so people can check off and say, well, I've met a regulatory requirement, right? I mean, I can prove that my operators have been, quote, trained. That's not necessarily very good training. It may be effective, it may not. If it's backed by people who say, in order to operate this particular unit, I need to be able to do the following 7 or 8 things, then you can back that up to behaviors and say, I want to test and see if my operators can do that. Now, we get asked all the time, hey, but we don't have an operator training system, by which they mean a high-fidelity simulator system. Is that required? It depends. It may be very, very helpful. On the other hand, I can take a relatively low-fidelity model, and if it always points in the correct direction, it doesn't have to necessarily get the magnitude right, but if I can show that the vector is going in the right direction, and if the operators understand that, then a model doesn't necessarily have to be high fidelity to be extremely effective in training operators. What you're trying to do is you're trying to demonstrate that the operator, when faced with certain situations, understand what techniques have to be taken in order to deal with that. And if you can draw the competencies down to behaviors that you can measure, you can improve operator competency. Okay. Remember that slide I showed where we were looking at the data from that plant, and we showed that the displays, if you used proper displays, you could greatly shrink. Not only did you reduce the time it took to solve these scenarios, but you can also reduce the time. Well, I want you to notice one other thing. There's somebody down here, some operator, who before you even change your displays can operate that plant. Why do you think that operator can operate that plant, even if his displays are horribly flawed? He has a mental model of that plant in his or her head. They know everything about that plant. They could take a bunch of faceplates. They don't even need a process diagram. They know all that by rote. So if you can find those people, and if they're articulate, they can train their colleagues. So I've used this on occasion. I had a project in Geismar, Louisiana, where our own company, we put in an operator training system. And when I sat down, before I did anything, I sat down with essentially the guy who's the major domo of the plant, the guy that everybody looked up to, the operator that had been put into the training program, who run the training program because he knew how the plant ran, all the different units in the plant. And so I sat down with him and said, look, here are the competencies that I think we need. What do you think? And he came up with the competencies. He came up with the behaviors. He came up with the scenarios. Okay. When you get done with it and the system worked, he was the one who was doing the training. And we took a major step up in the ability of the operators to run those units. In fact, it got to the point where the operators, when I'd come into the plant, operators would come to me and say, you know, I want you to come see something. He said, they'll come over and they drag me over the screen. You say, you see this control loop in this particular part of the plant? This doesn't work at all in the plant, and it does exactly the same thing in a simulator. It's terrible. Now, if you could put this thing in a simulator, why can't you fix it? That's a really good question. When you have operators asking that, you've got somebody dedicated to helping you try to fix that problem. I'm not saying we're going to solve them all. We're going to try some of them anyway. All right. Control room environment. Now, this is the one of the 6 that requires significant capital. But there are big gains to be made. And you can adopt some of these things without overhauling your control room completely. What I want to point out is that if you plan your control room well, you can take your workflows and you can plan your control room around the workflows. Instead of throwing a box out there, sticking a bunch of consoles and saying, okay, now operate the plant. If you think about workflow and you think about the how to balance the loads, you can do a lot. In fact, we can show that we can improve collaboration, we can improve alertness, we can reduce fatigue and what's called vigilance decrement in the academic world, and we can reduce extractions, distractions. So here's one example. It's not one of these over here, but this is just one example. There's a control room about 200 square meters that we recently worked on. There are 16 operating consoles, 32 monitors, and 3 large overview screens. And what we've been able to measure is 40% less extreme tiredness during the night shift, 14% fewer mistakes, and 23% fewer headaches and eye problems. So we've done some interesting work with some of our partners. So let me talk about one of them that's become more interesting of late. People ask us about lighting in control rooms a lot. And in fact, one of the problems that you'll see over and over again if you look at any of the human factors literature is that people who work, particularly on night shift, have a significant group of health problems associated with working night shift. One of the causes of that is that we are interrupting their circadian rhythm. And there are commercial systems now that you can put in that will actually use circadian rhythm programming in the lighting, and the results of that are pretty dramatic. The other thing that you should think about is doing what you can to reduce blue light. Blue light interferes with the production of melatonin in the human body, and the result is people who are exposed to high levels of blue light at night have a much higher tendency toward obesity, diabetes, cancer, and even heart disease. So there are important things that you can do with your control room environment to improve the performance of operators. So, I mean, among the things we've got here, integrated consoles, ergonomically designed consoles, sit-stand, directional sound, that is sound that is so specific. So there's a lot to be done in a control room environment. We're learning a lot more. So how do you learn more about these things, and how do you do them? Okay, first of all, there's a lot of public information out there. You can start with our website, asmconsortium.net. We have a tremendous amount of information. Anything we've published in open literature is available on that site. The members-only site has all of the reports and all of the research that's been done. We also, by the way, sell published guidelines. I've got examples over here. Those are you can purchase on Amazon. You can buy them from CreateSpace, which is Amazon's self-publishing organization. But these are a pretty good summary for alarms, procedures, and HMI. So that's a good start. Now, we're not the only game in town. The ISA puts out excellent work. The Center for Chemical Process Safety puts out good work. And I mentioned EEMUA from the UK also puts out good things. So all of those are quite effective. Okay, in summary, what can we say? We can say that human factors affect safety and incident avoidance, but not only that, it also affects the performance of your operations. I've given you 6 things you can work on to improve your operator effectiveness, and resources are available in open literature to guide your efforts, and the impact can be dramatic and has been demonstrated in quite a few plants and actually quite a few industries. So with that, I just want to, I don't know how many of you here are members of ASM member companies, but I want to thank all the people who've been involved all along the time. You can see there are 16 user members. We've had 7 people in universities working with us, and also we've had 6 associate members along the way. And I'm extremely thankful for the kind of work that's been done. I've only been involved with the consortium the last 4 years as its director, but it's a pretty impressive body of work. Any rate, and thanks to Honeywell for supporting it all this time. And as a final note, there's a nice bibliography of stuff. If you pull this presentation off, you can look up a lot of these sources. Okay, with that, I'm open to questions.
My name is Satyajit Verma. Just a couple of things. One is, and I don't recall, when this 1989, the Piper incident you're talking about.
Piper Alpha?
Yeah, the Piper Alpha.
I don't know, let's back up.
That is, yeah. That was that before the lockout tagout was implemented? Because it looks like that if the pump was de-energized and locked out, then it would have been, it would not have caused that incident. So was
Clearly,
that before LOTU was getting to be implemented?
I don't know. The date of this is 1988. Yeah. I mean, certainly most companies had lockout, tagout procedures before that. I mean, but that doesn't mean everybody did, or they weren't, you know, regulatory requirements. I don't know.
Yeah. And
that may also be true. He says that the oil patch might not be different.
What they were doing, you had straight up ladders, 30 foot, and a little cable and a belt to hook yourself to.
Okay.
Right, so that was one. On slide number 23, just a curious observation I have.
23. Okay, I'm going to guess what that is. Which
This
one?
Right. So you have that best operator which responded in almost like 2 minutes, right, in the first scenario.
Okay.
And something happened when the display was changed. Where is that best operator?
You mean here?
Yeah, because his response time now is, the best response time is even higher than that response, right?
Yeah, you know, part of this is you realize you've got randomized controls here, right? So that's not necessarily exactly the same person because these tests are randomized. It's close.
You have a
It's supposed to be
better,
the same
you had a
scale.
better slide there where you said catch these operators to train.
Yeah. So you, for
train the rest
example,
of them.
you might be comparing like this guy here with this guy here.
With that guy there, right?
It
Exactly.
might not be the same operator.
Right. So that operator was missing from that set, is what I'm thinking.
Maybe. I don't know. I don't know the identity of the operators because in order to be fair, these things have to be done randomized. I mean, we're not trying to create a bogey here where we put the best operators on one group and another on another. These things are truly randomized trials so that you can ensure the data is statistically valid. So I don't know the answer to that.
Any other question?
Julie.
Julie White. Tom, I really appreciate this presentation and the layout of the data and how you walked us through it. When is the next time you're presenting? Are you presenting at the upcoming AICHE process safety or process SPTC coming up in October in Galveston?
Well, I wasn't planning to.
This would be a great topic.
Okay.
My real question had to do with it was described in the control room improvement slide, step 6, and the noise abatement.
Yeah.
Directional sound.
Yeah.
Is there any public domain information available on how to do directional sound that you can direct us to?
Actually, there probably is. If it is, it's in Europe or in the Proceedings of the Human Factors Society. There's a lot of helpful information. I'm not a professional especially in the sound side. I mean, I work mostly in alarms, procedures, and displays. So the sound side is not really my area of expertise. But there probably is open literature. I would look in the Proceedings of the Human Factors Society. We actually advertise in that journal from time to time. So you might find good data there. Other questions? Got one.
Hi, I'm Mark Darby. Any comments on some of the analytics and maybe similar type of calculations that are intended to give kind of an early warning or alarm?
Yeah, sure. Okay, so early event detection systems have been around. They are effective. They are expensive to do. We've done some of those, and we've studied the impact of some of those. I don't include it in this group simply because it's more effort. It can be a real lifesaver, though. And actually, Honeywell is very interested in doing more than what we're currently doing. And we're working on a variety of things, including native language processing, where our goal is to try to improve operator competency by measuring what operators do versus what alarm help tells them to do. What do they do versus what the procedures tell them to do. And that's also an area where we're doing that kind of like early event detection and then looking to see what operators actually do and whether that works. It's a good question because it's the future in some ways. Anything else?
Yeah, I'm Larry Criswell. I was involved in a lot of operations all the way back from the 60s, and I want to compliment you on your program here. And I always summed up these problems by saying that operators don't make mistakes on purpose.
Absolutely.
And yep. by having a detailed system like this, where and getting the resources allocated to go ahead and actually accomplish these checks to be sure that you've taken a lot of these things into consideration, goes a long way. I personally was at plants where we had fatalities, and where we had which were like shift change, miscommunications, and and were personally responsible for some near misses that I'm quite ashamed of in a way. But they're just luck that we didn't have some major incident, and it was all because of lack of training, lack of communications, and kind of lack of a procedure of what to do in a particular emergency situation.
Well, thank you. Appreciate that. Anything else?
He was first.
Tim Mulvihill. I thought at one place you said the answer to this would be to automate procedures, and I'm not sure what is meant by automating procedures.
Okay. I'm not sure exactly what you're referring to. Let's see if I can answer that. In general, when I go out to look at procedures and just in general consulting, what I see is that people have done a really good job with startup procedures and shutdown procedures, and usually what you do for normal operation. If I ask them what are the top 5 most likely things to go wrong in your operation, I'll get answers, and I'll say, how good are your procedures for that? And usually when I do any digging, I find that the procedures are not particularly good for those. Even though people have seen these as near misses, often they haven't put the time in to devote the same level of effort. And yet that's where a lot of people's problems are. In fact, ExxonMobil did a really interesting study. What's his name? Kime is not here tonight, but he did an excellent study where he looked at what causes safety incidents in their plants. And what he concluded was, okay, a plant only spends 10% of its time starting up, shutting down, doing grade transitions and whatever, but that's where 50% and more of their incidents occur, what they call transient operations. It's an excellent paper. Other questions?
One last one here. Raul Ayala. Can you comment on a statement that I've heard that when they do alarm rationalization for the operators in the HMIs to put the alarms that are actionable first and relegate those that may be critical but not actionable at the moment later?
Yeah.
Because what do we want to keep is the interest and keep the ability of the operator to tackle on the things that are under his control. How do you guys go around that?
All right, so I didn't discuss advanced alarm techniques at all. There are a lot of very, very excellent alarm techniques. For example, there's mode-based alarming. So if I know that I'm starting up, for example, and I know that all these things are going to be in alarm and they're totally meaningless, I'll set up a mode-based alarm system, and those alarms won't show up unless they need to, right? I can shelve alarms. If I know maintenance is working on something and that's just going to chatter like crazy, I can shelve that alarm. Now, I prefer not to do that unless I have an enforcement system. That is, when that's whatever is going on, maintenance and whatever is going on, I know that the system will come back and enforce that alarm again. So, the kind of things you're talking about, there are advanced techniques that can be done and are available through your control system vendor to provide much better alarming for those kinds of situations. So, yeah, I mean, one of the things you're always faced with when you do an alarm philosophy is this a critical alarm, a serious alarm, or less than serious, but still something has to be done. If the operator doesn't have an action that can do anything about it, it should be probably an alert. Or if it's something that's critical, that's going to, it's like, the silly thing people used to say is just kiss your ass goodbye, right? I mean, what can you do about that? I mean, what used to drive me crazy in the early days of DCS, you get a systems alarm up there. All right. Operator can't do anything about the systems alarm. You need to make sure that that alarm goes to the appropriate party. That's got to go to the systems guy, not to the operator. I mean, unless it's going to make the operator unable to see the data they need or unable to take the action they need, that systems alarm should never show up in front of an operator. Operator doesn't need to know that. Can't do anything with it. It just will clutter the screen up, right? So, I mean, there's lots of techniques, and alarm management is by itself a whole discipline these days. So it's a great question, and not as easy to solve. Every sites may differ on exactly how they do that. Again, a communication requirement with the operator. Anything else?
Yeah, so Jose Rojas, the abnormal situation management is being basically focused on let's try to fix whatever has happened in the past, right?
Yeah.
Now, what is the consortium doing on the looking out for the future? Data analytics, I will say self-driving operations is being considered because I don't think that a human is more capable today than a computer to take care of 10, 20, 30 alarms in 1 or 2 minutes, because when you get an abnormal situation, your plant is coming down or your reactor is going to run away. Just way too many variables at once for you to take care of it. So are you looking for the future and saying, hey, the future is self-driving operations and will be taken over by machines? Basically, you need the human intervention in case that you need to push the shutdown button. But
so among many of the things that we do at Honeywell is we have something called Proc Ops. And inside that kind of a procedure system, we have logic that can run what we call handlers. Those handlers can take over an operation directly and can take the necessary emergency steps if they've got to be done so quickly that a human cannot do them. Of course, that's possible. We always ensure, however, that when we're doing something like that, we have some sort of feedback mechanism so that the operator knows what actions are being taken, so that they don't contravene something or they're not unaware that something else is going on in the plant. So yes, there are things you can do with logic. Now, we have customers who have the following illustration. They think that the control room should consist of a man and a dog. The man feeds the dog. The dog's job is to bite the man if he makes a change. Okay? So I personally don't subscribe to that, and I'll tell you why. Humans, regardless of how effective computers have become, humans still have some pretty amazing abilities in decision making, and I'll give you an example. I've got a book here by an extremely influential man named Gary Klein. Gary Klein has studied how people make decisions. He's looked at critical things like firefighters, policemen, and so forth. And he gives, I think, one of the best illustrations of why humans are still more capable than machines for some types of things. It seems this fire lieutenant one day was called to the scene of a house fire. He and his group went in to put the fire out. All right, well, after a couple of minutes of fighting the fire up on the first floor, fire started in the kitchen, typically, a typical kind of thing that happens. They couldn't make, the fire wasn't behaving the way it should. He said, there's something wrong. This fire's not behaving correctly. He yanked all of his guys out of the building. Within about 5 seconds after he got his last man out of the building, the floor collapsed. His people would have died. Okay, now read what happened. The fire had somehow found its way into the basement. It had found a source of fuel, maybe paint, maybe thinner, I don't know, whatever it was. The fire that they were fighting, which is what they knew was there, was not the source of all of the fire. Okay? But the thing is, he's making a decision without any information. He's only looking at some pattern and saying, this pattern doesn't fit what I know. Now, because humans, have a desire to survive, humans have some decision making that machines aren't going to have yet. Now, it may be AI will get us there, but I haven't seen that yet. I mean, maybe AI running on a quantum computer can be fast enough to mimic what we do. But there's stuff that we do instinctually. In fact, how many of you ever read a book by Malcolm Gladwell? You know who Malcolm Gladwell is? A kind of an interesting guy. He wrote a book called Blink. This is what humans do when humans have studied things to the point that humans can look at something and tell instantly something's wrong with it. And he gives a lot of interesting examples. We had a lecture from a defense analyst. A defense analyst had shown that he could use humans to find missile silos in vast numbers of photographs. In fact, the humans were faster than anything else that had been developed. And literally, they had a set of electrodes and all set up on the human's head. And before the humans could even recognize consciously that they were seeing something, their neurons were already telling them that they'd seen a missile silo. So they had trained themselves to the point where they could just instantaneously see it. They could flip through photograph after photograph at an incredible rate and find the missiles in the photographs. So, any other questions?
Tom, we would
All right,
like to
thank you
thank
very
you
much.
for your participation.
Thank you.
Before you guys leave, I would like to call Rasha, and she has an important announcement for you guys tonight.
I know everybody's tired and they want to go home, so I promise I won't take more than 30 seconds of your time. I hope you enjoyed dinner. We certainly enjoy hosting all these workshops with you guys. And just a quick thing, we are actually hosting a Mother's Day lunch on Mother's Day that would be open to the public and to everyone. So if anybody's interested, just feel free to reach out to me or just grab an invitation from out there. I promise I won't bother you about it. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, on behalf of the South Texas section, we would like to thank Tom for his participation in the dinner meeting. And we would like to thank all of you for your attendance. Looking forward to see you until September, which is our next monthly meeting. But we are going to have some events during the summer, so keep tuned. We have our LinkedIn, Facebook, and newsletter, so sign up for those so you can receive the notifications. Thank you.